Our first trip to the range with this project, well, that was just ugly. There ain't no way around that. So we came back to the shop here, and then we came up with the game plan. And I sanded down the high spot here in the barrel channel where the wood was contacting the barrel. And then I changed scopes just to be on the safe side. And I loaded up some new cartridges, a new load for us to try, 117 grain Sierra Game Kings. And I also had a few of the ones we started with on that first trip, the 120 grain spears left over. And last week I went back to the range. And all I can say is, we got our work cut out for us on this rifle. So let me bring y'all up to speed real quick with the results of that second range trip before we go jumping off into the deep end on barrel cleaning, because that's where we're going next. I started off with 4 rounds left over from our first range trip, so the 120 grain spear hot cores, the starting charge I used before, just to see if we could see any difference after sanding down the barrel channel and changing scopes. Well, you can see we had a little improvement, maybe. Those groups are so bad, it's hard to say for sure, especially with just 4 shots, them being that bad, but it looked a little better. And then from there, I proceeded to go on and just test the 117 grain Sierra Game Kings, and here's 4 groups from those.
About the right height, but you're about
2,483.
4 yards.
2,479. 2,534.
I think there's one in This is me.
2,500. 2,563.
I got
2,557. 2,526.
And for our last group, and this is the one that really bothered me, I loaded up 4 cartridges with the 100 grain Sierra Pro Hunters just to see if dropping down in bullet weight would make a difference. And these are also flat base bullet, which quite a few of you suggested before try a flat base bullet, which the hot cores are flat base, the 120 grain bullets we started with. But I just wanted to try something completely different that I really thought would have shot really well. And take a look.
I can see some.
2,689.
Yeah. Bullseye 2 inches apart. Shoot. I think I got a box. 47 grain full metal jacket boat tail. Cheap full metal jackets are really no good for nothing.
2,766.
I think I got a box.
Now, so far, I have really been surprised by this rifle, and not in a good way. I was expecting some decent groups on that first range trip. Okay, it just was horrible. All right, second range trip, okay, we should see some improvement here, and we did, but it wasn't much. And what got me was that last group with those 100 grain bullets. Okay, some rifles are just absolutely finicky, and you got to do some work to find a load that it likes. And we've barely scratched the surface on load testing. We've tested 2 loads, and we'll call that 4-shot group with 100 grain bullets, we'll call that a sample. So 2 loads and a sample. But what we're seeing is ugly. I've literally got surplus World War II rifles that went through the war that shoot more accurately than this, with surplus ammo. So, yeah, we're looking, we got something going on. And a couple of you commented before that after that first trip that I should check the bore on this rifle. All right, so I pulled out the Borescope, and this is where things start to get a little interesting. All right, so we're getting into the throat, and right here you can see some lands, and you can see some copper fouling. That's the light colored stuff here, and then you can see some dark carbon in the grooves there. We get on down, you can see more copper, more carbon. Now you can see the fouling inside the grooves starting to change to copper. And you see, we just got a lot of fouling going on here. We got all kinds of stuff going on in there. And then the copper fouling in the grooves, well, that's just getting even larger, and that's just an ugly bore. And I really wouldn't have expected that much fouling with the fewest shots as this rifle's had through it. The fellow I bought it from, he said it had less than 75 rounds through it. And I believe him, I really do. And I've only fired 45 shots or so we're 120 rounds, somewhere around there. You can see as we get to the muzzle, yeah, that's just not pretty. Now, the plus side to this, with all that we got going on here with the copper fouling in the grooves, that tells me that the taper is correct on this barrel. A rifle barrel should have a little taper getting smaller as it gets to the muzzle. We talked about all that with the Westerner, which we'll get back to that Winchester Westerner one day. Anyway, different topic. That tells me the taper's right on this barrel. So we got that looking good. And honestly, with all the copper fouling inside the grooves and everything else, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I didn't grow up with a Borescope. These just became reasonably priced over the last few years, and I've just started experimenting with it. So I really don't know if what we're seeing is good or bad, other than we have got a ton of fouling in this rifle. I do know that much. All right. So that got me curious. All right. What does a good bore look like? Well, let me grab another rifle real quick and I'll show you. This is my Winchester featherweight and 7mm Mauser. And this seemed like the perfect bore to compare to the 257 Roberts, because I know this rifle's a shooter. It's accurate. And these rifles are very similar in that they were made within a year of each other. They were both made at the FN factory just down the road at the FN plant in Columbia, South Carolina. Both featherweight barrels made using the same processes, possibly made on the same machine. Right. So this seemed like a good one to use to compare to the 257 Roberts. So let's see what we have on this one. So we have the throat. Now we're getting into the bore. And keep in mind, I have not cleaned this barrel with all the shooting I've done on it. And it's got probably about 50 more rounds through it than the 257 Roberts. All right, we got a couple specks of rust right here. Some more, we got some surface rust going on there, which tells me I need to clean it. But anyway, but look at the metal. Notice you don't see the fat. Look how shiny the metal is in there. You know, we just don't have the fouling in this one, like the 257 Roberts. And this one's, we can see some different marks inside the grooves. But this barrel's pretty much spotless. And I will run a brush through it before we leave here. All right, here we go. We finally have some copper fouling. You can see the turquoise right here on the lands where the copper's oxidized. Same thing right in here. And that's pretty much it. And we got some really bright copper right here at the end, right here at the muzzle. World of difference between these barrels as far as the fouling. Right now, and again, this is where it gets interesting. I did a break-in on this Mauser when I got it, brand new. And I've talked about my break-in procedure in the past where you shoot and clean, shoot and clean, shoot and clean, all that fun stuff. Okay, I don't know that it makes a difference. I really don't. I used to do it. All my rifles that I did it to shot great. That's all I can tell you. Everybody's saying you don't need to do it these days because the barrels are so much smoother. All right. I was starting to believe that myself until this. All right. I doubt seriously the 257 Roberts had a break-in procedure done. Most people don't do it. All right, but the whole point of a break-in procedure is so that you get rid of the rough surfaces, tool marks, that type thing in a barrel in the bore so that it doesn't cause a lot of fouling. What the difference between these two rifles is day and night as far as fouling, and this 7mm Mauser should have a lot more rounds fired through it. And I've cleaned it a couple times since I got it. Might even did a video on it, but I have not done a heavy cleaning on it at all, so other than the break-in process. I've just ran a brush down this barrel a few times. That's it. Almost no fouling. Okay, so that's really making me go back and question the whole break-in process thing. Does it help? Now, some barrels just foul easy. That's just, every barrel's as unique as a fingerprint. Some don't foul easy, some do. This could be coincidence, I don't know. But I can tell you the one that I did the break-in procedure on has almost zero fouling in it. And the other one is just slap full of fouling. So I thought that was really interesting. We'll get more into that later. Okay, back to what we have going on here. So for this 257 Roberts, we're going to start off by just cleaning this bore. And I mean cleaning it. And I'll leave a link in the description below where I explain the different levels of gun cleaning. And this isn't something I do often. But this one's shooting bad enough and dirty enough that we're going to do it. And those old military rifles I talked about, I have seen them go from shooting over 3-inch groups to 1.5 inches just doing a thorough cleaning of the bore. All right, so I'm going to start off with some Hypees number 9. I'm going to soak down a patch that I've got wrapped around a bronze brush here. And all I want to do right now is just knock out any loose stuff from where we were at the range shooting. That patch might be a little bit big, 25 caliber. That's a small bore. A little tight. New brush. It's best to do this with a used brush or one slightly used. And I did clean this barrel before we went to the range, before the first trip, just standard. I ran this brush through here 4 or 5 times with some Hypees number 9 just to knock out any loose stuff that may be there. I just didn't realize how bad the fouling was in this bore. So yeah, we're going all out now. And lesson learned for me in the future, just start off with the Borescope. And the reason I'm taking the brush off, screwing it off, and then putting it back on coming in from the chamber is because it is such a tight fit. If it wasn't such a tight fit, I would just be scrubbing going down the barrel, but it's starting to loosen up. And we do have a lot of trash here. And now I've got a standard cleaning jack and I've got some round 22 caliber patches. Because this 25 caliber bore is pretty small. And I want a loose fit in here because I'm going to take this, and I've got my bore guide here. And someone reminded me of this in the past, but I've got a rag over my stock. And all of this is to protect everything from this kroll. Or any chemicals for that matter. But, all right, so we're going to soak this patch here in this kroll. And then we're going to run this down the bore. And I really want to soak this bore with the kroll. I mean, really soak it. Do it a couple more times just to be sure. Okay, we've got kroll running out of the muzzle now when I push a patch through. I would say it's sufficiently soaked. Now, I found out working on that Westerner that the longer that kroll sits, the better it does at getting rid of that hard carbon, baked in carbon, the really black stuff. And that's the stuff that seems to be the toughest to get out. So I'm just going to let this soak now. So this bore has been soaking for 24 hours now in the kroll penetrating oil. And that really seemed to have made a difference in the past, letting it soak like that. And now we're ready for some JB bore cleaner. And I've got a bronze brush here, same bronze brush that we used yesterday when, or the beginning of this video, when I cleaned out the bore just using a patch wrapped around it and with the Hoppies number 9. And the reason I wanted to use this brush, it's already been broke in now. We've already ran it through here with a patch wrapped around it. And I also cut my patch down because 25 caliber, it's a small bore. We don't want it really tight because I want to be able to scrub back and forth in here. And I'm not going to go crazy on this. I'm not going to be extremely aggressive or anything like that. But that little bit of wear on the brush there, smaller patch, all that's going to help out in just a moment. And all I'm going to do is apply some JB to this, and I really need to pick up a new can of this stuff. After about 20 or 30 years on this can, it's starting to look a little rough, and there ain't much left of it. And I'm just going to coat this patch really well. And this is actually going to be the inside, the side wrapped around the brush. I want this stuff oozing out as we go. And now I'm going to wrap this really well. Now we're going to coat this side of it. And this stuff does make a mess. But it works. That's the only reason I fool with it. If it didn't work, I wouldn't use it. Especially with the mess it makes. You see, we're having a hard time getting it in the bore guide. So you know it's going to be tight going in that little 25 caliber bore. I'm running this all the way through to start with. I'm going to unscrew the brush on the end. And then I'm just going to repeat a few times to make sure we get this JB really spread out through the bore. There we go. We've got stuff coming out the end of the muzzle now. We'll put a towel over here so I don't make as much of a mess. Now I want to make sure the brush doesn't come out. And it did. I'm gonna grab some tape real quick because I want to mark this cleaning rod. And that's where we want to stop at. I don't want to get any wear on my crown. So we're going to put this blue painter's tape right here. Now if it'll back out, there we go. And I'm just going to do this about, I don't know, 10 times or so, maybe 15. Now I'm going to take this bore guide out because it needs some thorough cleaning itself. We got the JB all over it, inside it and everything else, which is good. It did what it's supposed to. It kept most of that out of the chamber. So now I want to take a standard round patch, put some hoppies on it, and I've got a standard jag here. Now we're just going to push all this gunk out the end, and I've got a towel laying in front of the muzzle. Yeah, good thing I did that. Yes, that's some pretty nasty stuff. I actually think I'm going to take one of these large square patches. These are, I think, 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. I'm going to cut it down just a little bit and use it on the jag. I'm not getting a very tight fit with these little 22 patches, which is what I wanted with the Kroll, because if it's really tight, it would just push it all out the end of the muzzle. But getting this JB out of here, that's what I want to do. I want to push it all right out the end of the muzzle. So I'm going to go to a little bit bigger patch. And I might have to play with folding this over or something like that till I get a really snug fit. But we want that tight fit on this. That's a little better. And now these patches are coming out pretty clean. I'll flip this one around, run it through again, and then we're just going to go through here with dry patches, and then we're going to pull out the Borescope again and see what we've got after the cleaning. And you always want to finish up with the dry patch. For those of you that aren't aware of it, I know most of you are, but you don't want any oil, any moisture, anything like that inside the bore. It's looking pretty good. And I did clean the 7mm Mauser yesterday, just to get that rust out of there. That bothered me. But when I finished, I put a light coat of oil in the bore on the end. I put a few drops of gun oil on the patch, ran it through there, and then I'm going to store it that way. That'll prevent it from rusting in the future. But before I shoot it again, I'm going to want to run a dry patch through there and make sure there's no oil still in there. And because I'm keeping my rifles in a safe, so they're sitting with the muzzle up, I don't want much oil in there because eventually it would all just run back down toward the chamber just from it sitting like that. Now let's see if we made any progress here. Here's our throat. Oh, where those lands start, that looks really good. That's where you get your tool marks, right in this area from your reamers, and we just eliminated a lot of that. We still got some carbon. All the copper looks to be gone. That's what I was expecting. Yeah, that looks really good. And we're down to pure steel, and Let's see, a few traces of copper. So we still got some fouling right toward the muzzle, which is okay. I'm not trying to make this pretty. Yep, fouling right here at the end, but we're down to steel and it looks pretty good. So we made some progress here. Now that we're back down to steel, this barrel should take it a lot longer to get fouling back in it because the steel surface it has been smoothed out, you might say. And we saw that with the Borescope. Everything looked really smooth on the steel. It's a good sign. So we're just going to have to get to the range and try it and see. And for this next range trip, I'm going to start off with the 120 grain spear hot cores again. Just those are going to be our standard. Maybe they never shoot in this rifle, but if we see them suddenly, that a group with them suddenly get small, we know we made progress doing something. So that's going to kind of be our standard. But I'm also going to load up a lot of sample loads for this next trip. We're going to try some different powders and bullets, and we're going to experiment. So instead of doing the 20 round incremental testing like I normally do with 5 4-shot groups at different powder charges, we're going to do one 4-shot group with a bunch of different combinations. And hopefully we're going to find something in all of that's going to show some potential. Something that's not a 3-inch group. And we should find something. And this is my own theory here, even with fouling. Okay, this barrel with the fouling it had. I'm convinced if we went long enough shooting different loads and experimenting, eventually we would find something that would shoot in this barrel, even with the fouling. I think getting all of that out of there, though, it's just going to make it a lot easier to find a load, if that makes any sense. You get a lot of fouling, I think barrels just become more sensitive, more temperamental. And you've just got to hit that perfect charge. Whereas something like this, I think it's going to be a lot more forgiving. But that's just my own thoughts on that, for whatever that's worth. Anyway, I can't wait to get to the range, and hopefully we're going to get there this weekend, and then I'll get all that editing done, get results posted, and then we'll see if we made any progress. But we're going to get there on this rifle, one way or another. God bless, and have a great day.